Greetings. This is Bradford Donald Keller Townsend, and this is a Forward Research Report, Wednesday, January 16th, 2019, approximately 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm calling this a reply to my friend Gregory Mannarino, the Robin Hood of Wall Street. What I'd like to point out to my fellow Navy veteran, if you didn't know, Gregory was a physician, a medical doctor in the United States Navy, and I was a UDT SEAL frogman in the Navy. So we're Navy comrades. And we've been friends for a while on Facebook and had some interaction there. I'm a former insurance executive and investment banker, and founded the National Bank of Indianapolis. What I'd like to say to Gregory is corruption and financial collapse, an end to our financial markets, and a new monetary system are an order of magnitude less than a list of biological, ecological, human problems, pollution, and natural resource exhaustion. Deforestation. A new government has been elected in Brazil that is going to aggressively cut down rainforest, and rainforests in countries such as Indonesia as well and many parts of the world are being cut down, and those are the lungs of the earth, and huge amounts of species and wildlife are destroyed on pretty much an unimaginable scale. You really have to see a logging operation with machinery and see how fast they can clear and denude a forest of its plants. Overfishing. 2/3 of the world's fisheries are collapsing and are projected to be dead. Probably by mid-century, not very far away, less than a third of the world's oceans will have fish. And depending on what happens, those may be overfished as well in a desperate move. Pollinator extinction. Pollinators such as hummingbirds and bees have had a massive die-off. You used to drive your car in Florida, let's say through an orange grove, and my grandparents had to have special plastic coatings put over their cars because the bugs were so bad. Now the bug populations have diminished a shocking, stunning amount, and when I was a boy we used to run around with mason jars with holes popped in the lid and catch lots of fireflies, and you hardly ever, what used to be big swarms of fireflies, now you hardly ever see them. They're quite rare, as well as birds have gone down a huge amount. I've noticed also the fish, because I was fishing 50 years ago in Florida and Michigan, and the amount of fish has really gone down. You used to just look off your fishing boat and down, if let's say you're fishing in the Everglades, and it was, felt like you could almost walk right on top of the fish. They were everywhere. You couldn't see, even though the water was clear, only 15 feet below you, because there were so many fish in the way. And now you go to the same area to go fishing, and you can boat around for miles around and see literally no life in the Everglades. It's a truly stunning, staggering change. Fossil aquifer depletion. There's ghost towns now of farming communities all over the world, particularly in places like North Texas and Oklahoma, with the aquifers there being depleted. So there were generations of farmers, let's say 4 generations of farmers, were able to make a a wonderful living and have a lifestyle that they really coveted, and now they're ghost towns because groundwater and aquifers all around the earth have been used for industry and agriculture and washing and cleaning and drinking, and they're gone. And we're getting to critical levels. Mexico City has a major crisis having to do with this, and it's just going to continue. And we're headed toward a famine food crisis with certitude. We know that for certain. I've never met a scientist face to face. My family founded Harvard University in Boston and Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and we've given millions and millions of dollars as well as granting them land and other things. And so I can go to some of these people because my family are major donors to the universities and speak to the scientists and say, this is off the record, what do you think? And they have told me, I've never had a single scientist in the natural sciences tell me that they don't agree that by 2070 there will be no more mechanical, industrial, fossil fuel, uranium-powered civilization. The uranium, the coal, the natural gas, the crude oil will be essentially exhausted. There might be a small rump or portion of humanity that still has something like a modern Western lifestyle, but the author of the Hunger Games went to my alma mater, Indiana University, and the consensus, and again it was 100% of the natural scientists that I've spoken with, is that the Hunger Games scenario is probably the most probable outcome between now and the end of this century. And over 20,000 concerned scientists, all with at least a PhD, at least one PhD in the natural sciences, have sent multiple letters to the United Nations, the U.S. government, and many different places where they thought that, and they've been doing this now. So the U.S. Navy's 1957 assessment of our energy situation being depleted before mid 21st century is right on track. Admiral Rickover, I have a speech where he says that if we don't educate our children and find an alternative to fossil fuels, we'll be back to an agrarian civilization, and nothing has changed. The Club of Rome's limits to growth is also right on target and nearly very accurate, and even though it's decades old as well, and they've done updates about every decade and run the computer models again, and actually things are turning out worse than the Club of Rome MIT study, where they first use systems engineering, advanced mathematics and computers to put together a model, and they've been refining the model now for decades, and it's probably plus or minus 3% accurate, and it says by the middle of this century, which is right around the corner, we will, the combination of overpopulation, increasing pollution concentration, and depleting of all types of natural resources such as copper and lithium will make mechanical civilization no longer viable. So we're going to have famines, and we're going to have resource wars, and these are, to me, because probably millions of people or billions will be dying in these natural resource wars and famines. I think it's a bigger concern than having been shut down the NASDAQ and the currency markets and so forth, maybe permanently or for a big reorganization. And there will be a lot of people taking haircuts and losing their wealth and have to become subsistence farmers. That some of the billionaires and millionaires who stay in these financial markets will eventually, who are complacent, could lose everything and end up with negative net worths, actually. Mineral depletion is huge because that also includes fertilizer like nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus. Lithium for batteries is a big one. We have the nuclear power plant meltdown and waste storage problem. As fossil fuels and uranium are exhausted, then who's going to maintain the nuclear power plants? We haven't decided on a storage method, and they could leak. Although tons and tons of nuclear waste, a earthquake, a hurricane, a meteor strike could cause one or more power plants to have a huge issue, and we're due, and probably because of global warming, and I won't go into all the factors, we're more likely to have volcanic eruptions and major earthquakes now. We could have our power grid taken out, or a portion of the world that's facing the sun at the time. If we have a coronal mass ejection solar flare, it's called a Carrington event, happened over 100 years ago, around the Civil War era, that took down the communications then, which was over wires, where they went tickety tick tick tick, tickety tick tick tick, a telegraph, and ticker tapes, that type of technology, and it fried everything, and the emerging electrical grid. And if that was to happen today, or if there was a cyber attack by a terrorist or a hostile nation, with famine and resource wars on the horizon, and the millions of people that have been killed in these wars, and if they intensify, somebody might get a team of clever, talented software engineers and programmers that decide to launch destructive cyber attacks. And so about the only problem that's facing modern mechanical fossil fuel civilizations in its last 2 or 3 decades of existence that we can probably solve is the one that Gregory Mannarino, Dr. Mannarino, is most concerned with, and that is the monetary and financial markets. That's what I find with people on the internet. They're on the financial side, or they're just doing the ecological, or they're just doing the potential for wars. I'm saying here's the list of critical problems, and the only one where I think it's even plausible to make headway, and it wouldn't get to be perfection, would be political corruption and the monetary financial markets. That is a doable problem. We might not get it to a perfect state, but there's room. We could start arresting bankers. We could start arresting corrupt politicians. We could take money out of politics. Those are things that are humanly possible. Stopping degrading of our soil, which is down to what farmland. We're losing 14 million hectares per annum, and that's the state of Indiana and half of Kentucky, plus the soil's being rapidly degraded and eroded, and 3 centimeters takes 1,000 years to form, with forests. So we only have decades of topsoil left unless there's a very radical change, and hundreds of millions of people around the globe quit doing jobs like being truck drivers and waitresses and accountants and insurance agents, and become small farmers using organic regenerative permaculture agriculture. And that such a radical change of getting people to live being an accountant, a stockbroker, a biochemist, PhD, and then to quit doing research and then to go homestead 3 acres. That is not. People would rather fight wars than make that big peaceful adjustment of depopulating our cities and spreading out and breaking up big farms, commercial farms, into small farms. And they can't be too small and they can't be too big. 3 to 5 acres is good for a family of like 6 or 8. They can produce plenty of food and have plenty to sell if they use intensive agriculture using multiple crops. Let's say they have over 50 crops and trees, strawberry bushes and apple trees and 4 or 5 different kinds of birds, chickens, turkeys, geese, pheasant, so on and so forth. 3 different kind of rabbits, 12 different kinds of chickens. They're very diversified, and then every person in the family might have 3 or 4 skilled trades that they develop, like fixing bicycles, doing carpentry work, being a blacksmith, making shoes, making gloves, knitting sweaters, so on and so forth. So, Greg, you've been my friend for a while, and I'm doing this in the spirit of amity and friendship, to raise, to take the blinders off. The reason, and this is going to get you if you do listen to this video, and you won't be able to counter this with an argument. They're not building mines and they're not building oil refineries. They take 10 to 15 years to build, and there's a huge amount of upfront costs and bribes and so on and so forth. And geologists and chemists and all these people have to be involved, and governments. Everybody has their hand out if you're going to have a big project, and you have to pay them all off. If the CEOs and the power elites, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the board of directors of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and General Electric, General Motors, IBM, Alphabet, Microsoft, and Apple, they don't think it's worth their investment. I think it's too risky to build new plants, and they don't want to invest in maintaining our infrastructure, airports, ports, highways, bridges. So if they are fraudulent liars, like you said, so let's go to the empirical evidence. They are not building oil refineries. They are not starting new mines. They don't see a future. So they are, investing in bunkers to the tune of probably trillions of dollars around the world, and are telling the public everything's going to be fine. Go out and buy a new S-150 pickup truck, or take a vacation to the Paradise Resort in the Bahamas. They're not, while they themselves are investing in bunkers and buying large quantities of food, medicine, guns, and ammo. The bunker business is booming. It is booming. That's probably the hottest part of the U.S. economy, is the rich building bunkers. And that's a verifiable empirical fact. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Cheers to the Robin Hood of Wall Street. Thank you very much. Au revoir. Shalom. Ciao. Arrivederci.